Hi, this is Ben Quiggle with another edition of WCM's Outdoor Hospitality Update. I'm editor of Woodall's Campground magazine, and of course, my co-host Mike Gast, writer for RVTravel.com, former vice president of communications for Campgrounds of America Incorporated. And then our guest today, Bill Baker from the RV Industry Association. We had Monica Gerasi, there you go, I can pronounce it, on a couple of weeks ago from RVIA, and now we got Bill Baker. So excited to have him on. And I guess, Bill, just tell us a little bit about what you do at RVIA and how you kind of got started.
Sure. So I'm an RV industry veteran. It's been close to 30 years. All that time in RVIA. For the past 5-6 years, yeah. I've been involved in the research and membership functions for RVIA. So I handle all the market data, consumer research, as well as our membership department. Prior to that, I was sort of a jack of all trades. I had worked in the public relations and communications area for probably 10 years or so. Worked in the government affairs arena, did state legislation, some federal legislation, federal lobbying for a handful of years. And then moved over into the research and data. And I got my start. I remember way back in the early 90s, they had a public relations position open, right? And I had worked there as an intern for a couple of years. And I went and I interviewed for the job, and I got down to me and another guy. And I didn't get the job that time. I lost out to a guy named Phil Ingrassia, and So he started there and eventually ended up at RVDA. And a few years after that, another position came open when he moved up to VP of Communications for RVIA, and I slid in, and it's been a heck of a ride ever since.
Well, Phil's a professional talker, so no surprise you lost out to that.
No kidding. Yeah, right.
Yeah, and we had Phil on last fall, so he's a great guy to talk with. I love meeting him at industry events. Yeah. And speaking of events, I forgot to mention I'm at the California Camp Cal Now RV Park and Campground Alliance Conference here in California, which the weather's been absolutely beautiful here, and there's been a good crowd, although I think they cleared out for lunch. So the expo's going on behind me, but I think people wanted to go eat, so they kind of cleared out. But
well, run out and get yourself an In-N-Out burger, Ben.
Yeah, something like that. There's a Jack in the Box right by my hotel, so maybe Jack in the Box later. But I guess, Bill, the reason we brought you on was just kind of talk a little bit about the RVIA the report that you guys just released, kind of on the campground side of things. Mm-hmm. First report of its kind, right? Have you taken a look like this at the campground industry before?
No, going back to when we used to write, press releases and press kits, we had one about the number of campsites in the U.S. And, I think it was not really documented at the time, but I remember back in the 90s, we used to say there were about 8,000 private campgrounds and about 8,000 public campgrounds for 16,000. And obviously that number has grown over the years, but I don't think we really had a really good handle on it of how many campgrounds there are in the U.S., how many campsites. As an organization, if we looked at the growth in the RV market, 600,000 units shipped last year, 2017, 500,000 units, and just, and in between, roughly around 400. And just the number of units that were being shipped. You look at the KOA research that Scott Barr does, and the way the number of camper nights have been growing. If you look at just the overall interest in outdoor recreation, outdoor hospitality, how that's grown, especially prompted by the pandemic, and a lot of new buyers coming into the market with different expectations. So about a year and a half ago, as part of our strategic planning, we looked and we said, we really need to get a handle on just determining how many campgrounds out there, how many campsites, what's the breakdown between tent, RV, camping cabins, park models, what are the amenities? And so we put together this research to answer that question and, hopefully use it to spur more investment both on the private side and the public side to get more campgrounds and more campsites to better service the end consumer that we all share.
and you guys utilized CHM Government Services.
Yep.
And I've actually spoken with Meredith, right? Bailey, I think. At
Margaret
Bailey. Okay.
Yep.
You'll come to find out that my ability to remember names is very bad. So, but
maybe, yeah, that's her twin. Meredith is her twin, I think.
Meredith is her twin. Okay, but you guys utilize them, and
Yep.
it looks like you utilized a couple other partners as well to kind of put this together. Can you just kind of give us kind of a little insight onto, kind of how this was developed and
Yep.
and how you came up with some of the stats in the report, I guess?
Yeah. So the primary partner that we used, we went through, as Mike understands with these things, you go for an RFP. We had a number of bids. We ended up selecting CHM Government Services. The reason we had done that is they had done a very similar study on the public side for the National Park Service. We were aware of that report. It also had some campground, private campground segment in there that sort of touched on the things we wanted. We just wanted a little bit more in-depth look at that, more robust. So we partnered with CHM Government Services for the effort because we knew there was going to be a data gap, especially there in that public sector. And we knew they knew how to source and interpret the data that was available to go to a media, multiple locations and formats, and just bring a real good consistency and approach to gathering and lumping and all that data together. So, just the expertise they had was the reason we went with them. They partnered with two other companies, Soam and Data Crunch. Soam is a statistical company. They did the statistical modeling, and then Data Crunch really helped with the data aggregation, data validation, data cleansing, data visualization. So, it was a team effort, and it goes beyond that. So that was sort of on the back end, but really we also want to thank and show our appreciation to KOA and Scott for the sharing the North America Camping Report. ARVC lended some of their reports to us so that we could check and validate data. And the state campground associations were helpful too. So it was a really, a far-reaching project that had a lot of folks helping with the lift.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, it was interesting to me because I was involved in the North American Camp Report when we started it back in 2014, and I was actually the guy that had to dumb it down because Scott Barr is a wealth of information, obviously, as you know, and it's sometimes quite overwhelming to wade through that stuff and try and make it understandable for the general public. And I always found we determined early on that it was something we were going to share with the entire industry. So we just put that report together and really put it out there with a top line report as comprehensive as we could. And then but we were pretty open about if anybody had any other questions or needed to dive back into it with Scott, we were there for that. I noticed on the report that you did, you've got the top line out there, but the main report is kind of firewalled back for members. Why was that decision made?
At this point, we put a lot of money into that. Our thinking is that we wanted our members to have it and digest it, and then our plan is over the next month to share more of that the full report with industry partners over the coming weeks in April. So we'll be rolling that out to folks here, middle of this month into the month. So we do have plans to share.
Yep. The data seems really important for the RV industry and the dealerships out there too. But the primary target, the ones you really want to encourage with this, are those owners out there that can see what campgrounds are after or what the campers want from them.
Yeah, it's two different things, right? There's a couple different audiences. Obviously, on the private side is those campground operators. They're at the front lines every day to arm them with data that they can use to go out to secure funding, to secure investment. On the private side, our government affairs folks on the public side will use it with the federal government, with state government. There's a lot of money out there with the infrastructure bill, with the Great American Outdoors Act. So it's really, twofold. One, just to arm the industry, both on the public and private side, to encourage investment, to increase those number of campgrounds, number of campsites, to help boost the amenities that are available.
So where do you feel like we're at with the feds? They've got this wealth of,
Yeah.
facilities out there that have been allowed over time to kind of degenerate into what they are,
Yeah.
or at least be only maintained minimally. They certainly haven't kept pace with Wi-Fi and some of the other amenities that the private parks have gotten. So, what do you do with this information? How do you get it in the proper hands to the real decision makers on the federal level?
Well, so we have a really robust government affairs program that Jay Landers on the federal side heads, along with Chris Borneman. We're very tied into the Outdoor Recreation Roundtable. Um, we have a lobbyist, and the challenge there is to go and make sure that the money that is allocated through the Great American Outdoors Act, through the infrastructure bills, let legislators, regulators know that that money is available, and push to, you know, build more campgrounds. That's a long range, difficult process. But like, to reference your point, to upgrade the amenities that are there, to provide the Wi-Fi, to maybe expand the number of campsites available. So that's it on the federal side. State campgrounds are very, very popular with RVers. I think when you look at on the public side, they have more campsites than anybody else. And just to encourage them to invest in those properties as well.
Yeah. I guess one of the initial reactions I think we had, and
Yeah.
the industry had when we looked at the report, was kind of on that full service hookup data.
Yeah.
And I guess we kind of wanted to flesh that out a little bit. I noticed, in the release we got, it notes that 8% of public campgrounds and 51% of private campgrounds have full service hookups.
Yep.
And I guess just initially right off the bat, I think industry people were kind of thinking, wow, that's pretty low. So I guess, just what are your thoughts on where those numbers came from? And, maybe there was just a problem in how it was presented or something.
Yeah.
I guess.
Yeah, as an old PR guy, it embarrasses me to say that I didn't do the best job on that, right? And I looked at the final stuff and I missed something, right? So didn't do the best job. The report, what we said was that, as you referenced, Ben, is that 51% of private campgrounds and 8% of public campgrounds had full hookups, and that wasn't quite right. It's 51% of private campgrounds and 8% of public campgrounds have, or excuse me, campsites. So that number spread across the 1.6 million campsites that we identified. So it's actual campsites, not campgrounds, and it was actual sewer hookups. So
so it's not necessarily full service hookups. It's just sewer hookups.
I think what we were looking at was that if you had sewer, then you most likely had electric and water. So we sort of equated sewer hookups to having full hookups. I think it's like you could comment. Yeah, I think it would be very out of the norm to have a sewer hookup and not have one or two of the others, right? So we just sort of made a connection that probably didn't need to be made. But if you look at it, we went back and looked at the data by campground. If you look at it by campground, 84% of private campgrounds have full hookups. This correlates to what ARVC data. They're a little bit higher, but I think it's within the margin of error for both studies. And 42% of public campgrounds have hookups. 39% have electric. 25% have water. 13% have sewer.
So when you in the breakdown, 84% of campgrounds would have
on the private side have full hookups. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Right. So that was, but it goes back to, like you said, Mike, when you get a deck that's got, 80 slides in it and you're trying to, some of the things get lost in translation, and that's on me, and I apologize for that.
So what should a camper and RVer take away from this data? I mean, you're talking about what they want. Should they be troubled by it, that there's this huge gap in what they want and what's out there?
No, I don't think there's a huge gap. I think that, what this research does is sort of confirms what we've intuitively felt. There's need to be more campgrounds. There needs to be more amenities. So, so 84% of private campgrounds have hookups. But if you look at the campsites, it's 50 or 60% have full hookups. So even though there's a wide range of campgrounds that have full hookups, when you get down to the campsites, there's not as many campsites. So especially for new RVers that are coming in, they want those amenities. They want those things to make it easy, to make it, reduce the hassle. When you tie some of this stuff into the other research that we do, one of the main things that folks, have a little bit of heartburn about, that they're concerned about, is the sewer system, the dumping. How do you handle that, right? So I think that, if campgrounds can make that readily available, I know it's not easy, but that's one of the things that the campers want. I think that overall, I think that there shows a need for more campgrounds. I think that the amenities that are out there, you can get them. It's just probably not as prevalent as probably campers would like. It takes some forethought and planning to get the things you want. And I think that's one of the things that, especially for a new RVer, takes a little bit of time to learn.
I think what the great thing is with this camping boom, though, I think, is that more parks are exploring adding those full hookup sites. And I know on the new development side, which Mike knows, we hear about new developments all the time. When I talk with new developers, a lot of those are all full hookup sites. So, right. I mean, I think there is a possibility that definitely will increase, that those percentages will increase as the years go by here. And I just, to your point, Bill, they are demanding those kind of amenities. New RV owners want those kind of amenities. So it's great that the industry is trying to catch up. It's just, I think they're playing a little bit of catch up, because not that the industry was stale or stalled before, but, it's just really exploded here in the last 2-3 years.
Right.
And, yeah, it's just been amazing.
And one of the things we found is that, I understand seasonality and all that, but what we found is that in the June, July, August, traditional summer months, traditional vacationing months, the inventory gets tight. I mean, it's nearing full capacity. Other times of the year, it's not as much. It's what we found out, it's down around 55-60%. So it's how do you make these investments? How do you make these investments, for a time when it's really busy and it's not quite as busy other times during the year, right? And that seems to be, an issue as well.
Another part of the report I saw was the type of supported campsite types, and I noticed, on the private side, it mentions only 28% are tent, while on the public side, 92% are tent sites, and then. But on the private side, RV sites are like 99%, and public's 55%. So that was kind of interesting, because I know people are really looking for those RV sites. So it would seem that the public side, like the national state parks, have a lot of growth they could do to add more RV sites, I guess.
Yeah. So when we looked at it, and when you get to take those aggregate top line numbers, just a little bit over 27,400 campgrounds. And that's roughly split pretty even. I think it's 55% on the public side, 45% on the private side. So a little bit over 15,000 public sites or public campgrounds, 12,290 private. But then if you look at campsites, it's flips, right? So there's over 2.1 million campsites. 1.5 million of those are private. Just over 600,000 of those are public. You drill that down even further to RV campsites. There's 1.6 million RV sites. 1.4 million of those are on private, and just about 260,000 are on public. So, the ratios as you go down into campsites, it really tilts in favor of the privates.
So another interesting facet of this whole topic for me, Bill, is that the RV Industry Association also takes care of the park model industry.
Yep.
So and park models are a very popular feature on campgrounds.
Right.
And I know that the RV owner, the RV user, always looks at those as almost a negative, because it typically they go into where an RV site was.
It used to be or could be.
Increases the availability of it. It's a very attractive thing for a campground owner, because they can pull a lot more revenue off the same ground in the prime time.
Right.
So how do you counsel a campground owner on where to go? I mean, they're trying to maximize the revenue off of this piece of ground that they've got, and sometimes that means less RV sites.
Yeah, that's not something that we really addressed in this study. I think that what we were looking at is just how it breaks down. I think those are the business decisions an individual campground owner, campground system needs to make. But you're right. Something I know that the revenue per night is much greater on a camping cabin than it is on an RV site. From an industry point of view, those camping cabins, they draw a lot of people into the industry as well. So it's it's sort of a matrix of things that you know servicing the existing owners with campsites, but on the same time, those camping cabins are very popular, attractive ways to draw people into the lifestyle and to buy an RV as well. I think the answer is, let's take this data and let's work to expand, right? To get more RV sites, to get more camping cabins on those grounds as well, and help boost the industry.
And you also mentioned that you've got multiple audiences here, and there's there's a new this tidal wave we've had of new RVers coming into the market,
Right.
new buyers, and you've got those folks that have been doing this for 10 or 15 or 20 years. Is there a commonality still that you can draw across the data, or is it, or we have to start looking at it differently from the wants and desires of a newbie to a really experienced person?
Yeah, I think there are probably some distinctions you can make. Um, One of the things I think in this, this I think goes even before, all the new buyers came in with COVID, is that I think when you buy an RV, you have a bucket list of things you want to do and places you want to go. You want to go to Yellowstone, you want to go to Yosemite, you want to go to these big places, right? And consequently, those public campgrounds and the private camps out in those gateways community, that has a lot of demand. They get filled up, right? And so I think that you plan out, you eventually get there, but I think that as you sort of go on this RV journey, you realize is that you find other places to go. Like the average, I think most RVers travel about on an average about 200 miles from their house to camp. So you start going to the state campgrounds, you start going to lesser known national parks, you find those private campgrounds that you really like, they have the amenities that you really desire. So I think that some of it, there are distinctions, but I think that as you age through the owning process, some of those distinctions go away.
Do you think there's going to be a lot more pressure on those local parks, those state and local parks, now that the gas prices have done what they did? Historically, we've seen them kind of the RV owner contract and say, I'm only going to go 50 or 100 miles, period, and that's as far as I'm going to go because that's as far as I'm dragging this thing.
Yeah, I think that it depends, right? So you'll be getting more pressure from local campers, but maybe that means that not as many people are going to long distance camp. So, but yeah, that is true. That as gas prices rise, one of the ways that RVers compensate is they take trips closer to home, so they're not putting as much mileage on there.
Does Joanne DeVasio, who's the executive director of the New Jersey Campground Owners Association, mentions, pointing people towards the state association guides, which most state associations provide a guide, as a guidebook to campers. So that's some great thoughts there. And then Joe Moore, who's an RVIC board member and runs a consulting group, noted, if 13 to 15% of the U.S. population camps, cabins, glamping, and any alternative form of lodging will be something the other 85% plus or minus can enjoy, a new market to go after. So I guess he's just pointing out the glamping and accommodation side of things, which you kind of get to a little bit in the report. You kind of note 29% of campsites and private campgrounds are cabins, yurts, or some other accommodation, which I think those numbers are growing. Obviously, this is the first report, so it'll be kind of interesting as if you guys do this annually, it'll be kind of interesting to see how this data changes, I guess.
Yeah, I don't think we'll do it annually. I think that we'll probably do it on a 2 or 3 year cycle, much like our RVs Move America economic study. And I think that, what this does is that, we dipped our toe in the water with this and learned about what worked, what didn't work. We have a list of things to address next time we do it. But what it really does is it establishes a good baseline so that we can see, are those number of campgrounds growing? Are the number of campsites growing? What's the trend with amenities? So a really good baseline for us.
Well, Rick asked the same question after I asked it, and then he said, "Never mind." So Rick's watching. Bill, you know who Rick is, right? Yeah.
Oh yeah, yeah,
You talk to him all the time on the phone.
all the time.
Joe mentioned the gas prices too, about people traveling shorter distances, which is something we found in a recent article we did for Woodall's.
Yeah.
We asked park owners how that will impact travel. Um, Bill, I guess, are you worried, with inflation and gas prices, that it could impact RV travel at all this summer? Like, especially if gas prices start to go back up? I know they kind of sold out
Yeah,
right now.
we looked at this.
So,
we've looked at this a number of times. Over the 30 years I've been here.
yeah.
And what Mike said is true. Typically as gas prices rise, it doesn't impact usage. People find ways to compensate. And when we did our last round of forecasting for RV road signs, and after that, we looked at the impact of gas prices on wholesale shipments. And, I think it was in 2014, 2015, gas prices were rising, shipments continued to rise. I think there was another instance in 2008, the dates I might be off by a little bit, but I think in 2000, maybe it was earlier, prior to the recession, same thing. Gas prices were rising, wholesale shipments were still rising. The only time that when 08, 09, when gas prices were rising, shipments fell. But that was also due in large part because there were other economic conditions that were contributing to that. I think that gas prices by themselves gas prices by themselves are an important consideration, but they're not the only consideration.
Yeah.
It really has to be viewed in the lens of other economic conditions that consumers are feeling. And right now, even with inflation and gas prices, disposable income is up, wages are up. They have a lot of savings that they're still, they're sitting on a lot of savings. So I think that in the short term, we don't keeping an eye on it, but it's not something that overly concerns us.
Well, Bill will relate to this. In my time with KOA, when something like this would happen, when the gas prices would spike, you start getting media inquiries from the outside media, the folks that really didn't pay much attention to the camping industry by large. But they would call and they would say, "Well, your business must be in the dumper, right? It's got to be terrible." And we would say, "No, we're fine, we're growing," and they just wouldn't believe it, and because they don't understand that RVing and camping is a lifestyle choice, and people don't give up lifestyle choices easily, and they don't fluctuate. They've made a huge investment in this lifestyle choice in many cases, and they're just not going to park it and look at it in the driveway or pay that storage fee that comes along with owning an RV and not use it, not get the benefits. So it's something that just doesn't go away easily.
Absolutely. And the other thing is usually when that happens, the cost of other forms of travel are going up too. So, given the economies of RV travel, it remains a good option for folks.
Yeah. Yeah. Joe Moore mentioned our industry's recession resistant. So that's probably very true. So
Bill, what about your marketing? I know that the RV Industry Association just launched a rebrand of Go RVing, and I had a chair on that committee for about almost 15 years. I get dragged to Washington D.C. for a week every year, and it was always a pleasurable thing to sit on that committee. But the rebrand, I think during the rebrand, the press release that came out just the other day said that the audience has changed, and so the marketing has to evolve along with that. Does data like you're producing now really influence what Go RVing is doing to lure in those new campers?
Yeah, it actually does. So back when we were younger and I had more hair, we were going after boomers, right? I mean, that was the holy grail. And if you look at it now, there's still boomer owners, but it's much, you're seeing the rise of the millennials, rise of Gen X. We did a study on new buyers with Scott Barr, and the average age. So we did it in 2021 and 2022, just new buyers that never owned an RV before and had bought it over the last couple of years. And the average age, median age in 2021 was 41 years old. When we did it this past January, it dropped to 33. 71% of those new buyers are millennials or Gen X, right? So, I think that's what GoRVing's referencing are those newer, younger families that are coming in. The other thing we learned is that, a couple different things is they needed a little bit more help. So when we had all these folks flooding into the market, GoRV sort of put a pause on advertising and promotion to draw new buyers in, and refocused on producing. I forget what the count is, but it's in the hundreds of how-to videos for those folks. And the OEMs and dealers, all everybody along the in the in the industry does this and does a good job. But GoRV produced a bunch, hundreds of videos that helped show how to
Yeah.
set up camp, how to do this, how to do that. The other thing that we've learned, and we've known this for a while, is that one of the big indicators of whether someone stays in the market is how much they use their RV, how much value they get from that RV. And the difference between somebody that sells it and gets out of the industry and somebody that remains in the industry, remains as an RVer, is just a couple days. It's less than a week. Do they use that RV enough to justify the expense? And so that's another thing GoRVing is focusing on getting folks to use their RV a little bit more, just a couple days here or there, and hopefully that'll keep more folks in the market. And
I know the experienced folks that I write for and talk to a lot on RV's travel side would tell you to knock it off. I mean, they're kind of lamenting the loss of the ability to just show up on a campground at 4 o'clock and get a site sometimes. So that's changed too. I mean, the overall planning structure for using your RV is much different than it was 10 or 15 years ago.
It is.
So I guess looking at this report, and I guess what are some of your thoughts on the challenges that kind of lie ahead for the industry? Obviously, with RVIA estimates, we're going to add 80,000 some campsites this next year. There's tons of development going on. The private campground side is trying to meet the demand for more RV sites and different things, but it is a slower process. It takes a while to develop a park. I guess what are some of the challenges the RV industry and outdoor hospitality faces, I guess?
I think it is that runway to, what's the runway to get private and public on, projects online and developed. I think it's, the regulatory and legislative hoops that you have to jump through to get some of these things developed. So, and that sort of ties back in, I think that between this study and then, the data that RVIA has available, the data that RVIA has available on shipments and data, I think, there's the potential there to put together, a really good data toolkit to show folks that, RVing is growing. The industry is going to stay relevant and vibrant. And, that, campgrounds are a good investment, on the private side. And as stewards of public lands, you need to have those facilities available for people to enjoy.
Yeah. Joanne has a question, I guess. In monitoring social media sites, it seems there are a lot of RVs on the market. People ran out and bought RVs during COVID, and now maybe they're deciding it's not for them. Do you see that as a trend going forward? Is that like a huge trend? I do notice like more campers on the resale market.
Yeah.
But is that because they're buying new ones, or?
So, there's different churn, right? The ones, obviously some people, there's a couple different ways to look at that. One is you could have bought an RV, when the selection wasn't as robust as you would have liked. And so, now maybe you're going to go get something that is more in lines of what you want, what you need, especially if you've had camping experience and have a better idea of what you want and need. Some of it could be folks exiting the market. They bought an RV because of COVID and the travel restrictions, and this was a good way to go to vacation. But if we go back and look at the new buyer research that we did, the great majority of people either one plan to stay in the market or two, they plan to buy another RV. I think the at-risk folks were probably about 14%. That's not a number to laugh at. I mean, that's somewhat significant, but I think that, the repurchase intentions, I think, without the top of my head, I think they were probably around 70% that those new buyers said they were going to someday buy another new RV. And I think it was upwards over 80% for folks said that they plan to keep the RV that they had and continue using it. But, I think that, there's churn in the industry all the time. I think that, folks move in and out of the industry, they move in and out of vehicles. And one of the avenues that they use is private sale. I think that, that constitutes a very large percentage of used sales is on the private side.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's, and RVIA's been working on quality, and you guys have the RV Training Institute, which
Yep.
I know Kurt Hemmler's here at Campground Now conference. He's going to be talking. And so you guys have just been doing a lot of growth on the training side, getting more technicians into the industry. So.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, two of the biggest things that we found is that impact those repurchase decisions beyond how much you use it is, one, how many times do I have to go get service on this unit? And then, how much downtime is there? And secondly is, can I get a place to camp where I want to go to camp? That is really important. Now, on the flip side of that, they'll turn around and say, even though they might not have been able to get their primary spot where they wanted to go, they did find places to camp. So that's good. But getting back to those service, so yeah, RVTI, working with dealers, they're the other partner in that. Sorry about that. Working with dealers to boost the number of techs at dealerships, to boost their training. We're also targeting the mobile techs, the independent service centers, and Kurt has, built a real comprehensive program there to boost the folks that are out there fixing RVs and getting folks back on the road as soon as we can. And part of that, the other thing that, got a lot of press a while ago, but still ongoing, is the repair event cycle time. We work with the dealers and the dealer software systems to identify, what are sort of the top 10 most common RV service needs. What are the things that need to be fixed the most, and working with the dealers and the suppliers and the OEMs to make sure that those parts are, at the dealership or can get to the dealership quickly. So we minimize the time being down when the RV's off the road.
I guess what's exciting about reading some of these reports, especially when you look at the public side of things, is just all the new investment that the Great American Outdoors Act provides.
Yeah.
And I mean, there's a tremendous amount of needs, but hopefully that funding can help alleviate some of those needs at the public parks, and maybe RVers will see some change on that end too. So
yeah, I think that was one of the things is, and Mike, you could maybe speak to this. I think that, this is just a feeling we have, is that some on the private side see public campgrounds as competition. And I can see where that could be true. But I think that given, the ratio of campsites available on the private side to the number, 2.5 to 1 in terms of regular, total campsites, it's almost 5.3 to 1 for RV campsites in favor of on the private side. I think that the growth on the public side would have to be exponential. I mean, unheard of to rival what's available on the private side. And really, those public lands, those state parks, the national parks, they are a big draw for people to get into the industry to go visit that. And they're going to visit those, but then they're going to go visit your private campgrounds too. So I think that I can see why you could view it as some as competition, but really, I think that we're all in this together, and the more sites there are, the more folks are going to be able to go camp where they want and stay in the industry.
Well,
I'd agree with you, Bill. It really is a wide open market, and we obviously see these little infights break out in places like the Black Hills, where the state of South Dakota wanted to upgrade and expand some of the state parks in the hills, and raise the ire of some of the private owners out there. But that's kind of that not in my backyard thing that goes on.
Yeah.
But until the private sector really sees a downturn, where people are selecting the state parks and being able to, when state parks start over accommodating, or they become resorts,
Mm-hmm.
I guess that's the point where the amenities can't be matched anymore. There's an awful lot of folks that want to be close to the action in Yellowstone, but the kids still want a pool at the end of the day,
Yeah.
or they want that ice cream social at the
Wi-Fi,
end of the day.
right? Yeah, Wi-Fi.
Absolutely.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. So
Absolutely.
those places are going to be safe for quite a while. To your point, I think
Yeah,
they offer a different level that the state and national parks will never offer.
right.
Yeah,
Right.
and I think, yeah, I don't think the National Park Service or whatever is ever going to get to the point where their campgrounds just aren't going to be full, especially when you get to Yellowstone and stuff. So definitely, like the private parks in those areas are, still going to benefit from the tourist draw that, like Yellowstone and Grand Canyon and all those
Yeah,
bring in, So,
right. Yeah,
I know, talking to private park owners near those parks, they're pretty excited about the investments in the national park system too, because it encourages more people to come
yeah,
too.
yeah,
So
right. Yeah, looking at the data, the average number of campsites, on the private side is 124 sites and 40 on the public side.
yeah, so I mean, yeah, there's pretty big gaps. So I guess, did your report take a look at the electric vehicle stuff or
No, I mean
amenities for that? Or
we looked at. Let me see if I can find it. We looked at the incidence of 100 amp service.
yeah, yep, I saw that, and
Yeah,
it's pretty low numbers
pretty
for the
low.
100 amp.
But that's really,
But
I think that's really one of the things that, in addition to, what we said about the number of campsites is, what's coming down the road, right? The
yeah,
electrification of vehicles and the infrastructure that's going to be needed at the campsites, at the campgrounds to do that.
yeah,
And that has to tie in with the design and production of the units, right? It has to be consistent. I think that the RVTI, working together to get either technicians in the campsites or agreements with mobile technicians. I know that's very popular to have mobile techs come in and be available to service, units at the campsites. I think there's a lot of ways that the industry, being the OEMs, the dealers, the campgrounds, all of us that are servicing one customer, identifying those areas of opportunity, those areas of challenge, and how we can all work together, to overcome and realize our potential.
yep, yeah. So, all right. Well, I think that's pretty much it. I mean, it's been about 45 minutes, so we didn't want to keep you for too long, Bill. I know you're pretty busy.
I'm running out of words. I've reached my daily word allotment.
I don't believe it.
I just put up a link for the story that Woodall's did. It's pretty much a press release on the study, so people can have access to that. And there is a link if you are an RVIA member, you can actually access that report. And then, as Bill mentioned at the beginning of the show, they're slowly going to open up the whole report to everyone. They just wanted members to have access to it first. So that should be pretty exciting, so that everyone can see the full report. And then, of course, we're kind of excited to see what Campgrounds of America Incorporated has in their report, which I imagine you are too. So at RVIA,
they do a good job. They do a good job.
Yeah, they do a good job. So, but thank you, Bill, for coming on. And thanks, Mike, for being here as well. I know it's hard to get away from the beach in Hawaii. So.
Oh well, it's early here yet. It's not even 10 o'clock, so I got plenty of day left out here.
So, but thanks everyone for joining us, and we'll see you again next week.
Yeah, thanks,
Great
Ben.
seeing you again,
Enjoyed
Bill.
it. Yeah, good seeing you, Mike. Take care, guys.